John Lewis here of Lewis Archery Adventures. Series testing, successful hunting. Today I'm testing another head by VIP, and this is a fixed blade head, and it's called the Bomber. Though it looks exactly like the Commander, in many ways, it's the Bomber. There's a little subtle differences I'll go through in a minute, but it's a fixed blade head, and so I'm really eager to test it out and see how it performs. I'm using all my test regimen that I'm doing for 2022, and you can read about that in the description box right below this video, as well as see the scores there of how this head performed in each of the areas that I tested in. I'm using my Bowtech SR6, set at 72 pounds, 27-inch draw, and I'm using the Bishop FOC King arrows for most of the shots, but then for the really hard impact ones, I'm using the Bishop FAD eliminators. Let's zoom on in here and check out the Bomber and then put it to the test. Here's a good look at the Bomber. Now the Bomber basically is the same broadhead as the Commander, only it's not a mechanical. It's a fixed blade broadhead. So let me go through some of the specifications and then I'll talk about the design a bit. The ferrule is 7075, a T6 aluminum, really strong aluminum, and it's really thick. Okay, it's thick to give it extra lateral strength as well as to open up a really nice hole for the arrow shaft to be able to glide through. So it's going to aid in penetration as well as durability, especially on hard angled shots. It's going to be extra strong with that extra thickness and the strong aluminum. It's stronger than some steels. Now this is the 125 grain version. It has this steel tip, this same chisel tip that VIP believes is the best design for breaching bone and splitting bone. You can also use this tip, which is titanium, and that allows the head to be then 100 grains rather than 125 just by switching out these heads and these tips. And I really like that they have that modularity, and I've mentioned this before, but I like it especially when a head can go from 100 to 125 grains by replacing the tip, because it makes the tip a bit heavier and stronger. So that aids in durability on that hard impact, as well as it's going to aid in the FOC. It's going to increase the FOC because that weight is all the way up front. So I like that with the same head, you can either use the 125 grain with this tip or the 100 grain with the titanium tip. Now the blades are 0.035 inches thick of 440A stainless cutlery steel, really fine steel, and they're brought to a Rockwell hardness of 56. Now, all this looks very similar to the Commander, but the Commander has this internal inertia system that allows the blades to spring forward into their open position. These remain fixed. So the cutting diameter on this is 1.2 inches. And again, it's just fixed. They don't open. And so what that does is it gives, with the 1.2 inches of diameter, it gives a total cut of 1.8 inches, which is a really nice size cut. That's more than the typical 3-blade that's 1 1/8 inch diameter. This is a 1 1/5 inch diameter. Now there are some differences between this and the Commander. Here's the Commander, the mechanical version of this. The differences are the ferrule is a bit shorter and a bit thicker, and the blades extend all the way back over the shaft, whereas with the Commander they don't. The Commander extends a little bit farther out from the end of the arrow shaft than does the Bomber. So it's more compact, it's a bit more durable, it has a smaller cut that's going to aid in the penetration. Now another thing I'd like to note is that the blades are not considered barbed because they do bend back like this. And that's a really cool feature, to be able to have this blade over shaft design to make the overall length really short, but then also have them be legal everywhere because they're not barbed. So I'm really eager to put this Bomber to the test and see how it performs. $200.
It
It penetrated 8¼ inches. And you can see that the wound channel extends a little bit beyond where the tip ended up. And that sometimes happens in gel. It punches in and then the gel kind of forces it back a little bit. But it penetrated 8¼ inches. And when I compare the wound channel of the Bomber with the Commander, the wound channel, at least in gel here, is bigger with the Bomber because the blades don't compress back like they do a little bit with the Commander. $300. It penetrated through 57 layers. Now that's a little bit less than the Commander did. The Commander penetrated through 62 layers, and that's because the blades are not compressing back a little bit with the Bomber like they did with the Commander. So you're cutting more tissue as you do that penetration, which makes the penetration just slightly less. Here it is after 3 shots through the MDF, and it's still in pristine condition. You really can't tell that it's been shot at all. Here's the Bomber after the second shot through the steel plate. Now, it held up perfectly well through 3 shots in the MDF, and then through the first shot in the steel plate, it held up perfectly well also. Matter of fact, the blades are just in almost perfect condition. There's only cosmetic damage, but it did lose this one blade on the second shot. I'm not sure what happened there. I think that little pin must have broken off in there. There's a slight wobble to the ferrule, just a little bit as well. So unfortunately, it's not going to make it to the concrete round because it lost a blade, but the durability is actually pretty impressive. Here's the holes that the Bomber made in the steel plate, and you can see these are really nice triangular chunk holes. They're not just a little circle with 3 slits coming out of it. They're really impressive, and it's unfortunate that it lost one of the blades on the second shot, but the holes are really something to note. So what did you think of the Bomber? You know, the fixed 3-blade broadhead market is pretty competitive. It's jam-packed with a lot of great options. There's all kinds of good heads to choose from, but the Bomber brings some really unique strengths to the table. It flies extremely well, penetrates really well, holds up to hard impacts really pretty well, and that blade over shaft design allows it to accomplish a lot of those things while still having a bigger cut than most 3-blade heads on the market, and that it's not considered barbed because, you know, the blades can fold back. That's really unique. There's a lot of cool things to it. Now, if I compare it to the Commander, that's an interesting comparison. It has its strengths and the Commander has its strengths. The Bomber has its strengths in that the blades don't compress down, and so in the fully closed position, it's actually going to have a wider cut than the Commander. It's like brother, you know, Broadhead in the mechanical market, because those blades compress down. But at the same time, those Commander blades compress down to a cutting diameter of like 0.8 inches, but that also gives them an extra durability on hard impacts. And you saw with this head on the second shot through the steel plate, granted, that's second shot through the steel plate after going through the MDF 3 times, it lost one of the blades, whereas the Commander did really well with that because the blades compress down. So the benefit of the Commander is you get a little more durability with that compression, but a little bit smaller cut. With the Bomber, you get maybe a little bit less durability, but you're getting a wider cut. However, with the Commander, you get the option of if and when the blades deploy, boom, I mean, you get a really big cut of 2.4 inches in diameter. So definitely a head worth considering. You look at the score sheet and see how it performed in the areas that matter to you the most, and depending on what you're hunting and what your setup and so forth is, I think this head really is worth a look. Another great job by VIP. I hope you guys continue to produce really cool, creative stuff like this.